We're going to start with the consent agenda. We have previous minutes. And we'll start with that. If there's any questions, comments, if there are none, I'd entertain a motion to approve the previous minutes.
I'll make the motion.
Morton has made the motion. Oh, and all of us are here, so we don't need to do a poll. So all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? So moved. Policy, we have some first readings. The first readings, so you can provide any feedback, is participation of home study students in transgender and gender nonconforming students policies. Are there any questions, comments around these policies? I actually have one. Where's my?
I'm right here.
Right there. I just wonder, you know, if any of the participation of the home study students contradicts any of the athletic policy or policy wordage about maintaining certain classes and credits. Is there something in there that says
For the
that?
athletic participation,
Correct,
it probably does, but that's up for review as well.
correct.
So
So I don't know which one would probably
you
that.
should leave attendance and change.
Correct, okay.
Yeah, is the way I
Okay.
approach that.
What else? And we're, any questions, comments, before I entertain a motion to approve the first reading of those?
Oh,
I think that's what you
What's that?
I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
It took Beth to get my brain to catch up with
I'm not
what
sure
the point
I'm
was.
understanding, I just want to make sure.
When you were talking about home study, my brain was going to participation in athletic policy, like the conditions that allow you to participate. Home study students are allowed to participate.
Correct.
They don't have, during the day, they don't have to have a certain number of courses they have to participate.
Correct.
Is that the question?
That is, and if I remember from the athletic policy that's coming up, it actually specifies that in order to participate, you need, but it doesn't. So this is saying you are here only for 3, at least 60%.
I think that's
No.
exempted if you're a
So
home
that's
study
what I guess
student.
what
Yeah,
I'm saying,
that's
is
what,
making sure that they don't contradict each other.
They don't.
Okay.
So what you're talking about is, so a home study student can, I didn't get your question, so I
Yeah.
apologize. A home study student can participate in up to 40% of their core academics
Yeah.
within the public school and still be considered a home study student. So that's where that percentage comes from. So they
Right.
could take math and social studies
Right.
and still meet that criteria and be
Yep.
fine.
Yep.
It doesn't have anything to do with sports. So they could be 100% home study and still be eligible to participate.
Correct.
There's no requirement for them to be enrolled in anything.
that's still not your question, is it?
No, it's
I
You're
think,
still missing.
can I take a crack at it?
yeah.
So in the sports policy, it says that students, in order, at the high school level, in order to participate in extracurriculars, they need to, or play on a sports team, they have to maintain a certain course load.
Correct.
Like you have to be at least a half-time student, you have to be taking at least, and I don't know what it is.
Oh, am I misquoting that then?
You have to take 3, or to be a student enrolled at Richford or Enosburg High School and participate on the sports team, you have to be enrolled in a certain amount of classes.
Correct.
So I guess I'm thinking through extracurricular because we can't deny the extracurricular, but
Right.
athletics is different.
So I think that we just, if they are enrolled in the home study with an approved plan for from the state of Vermont or the AOE. So I think that that's their course load and we would just let them participate.
Right, so I guess I'm saying is, I'm fine with this policy if you amend or change the other policy that specifies, although home study students who carry this course load are eligible.
You just think we need clarity.
I do.
Okay. Do you understand?
Yes.
Maybe I'm not being.
I
No, I get
just
it.
don't know if
Okay.
it lands, which policy it would land.
Exactly,
Yeah,
that's what I was
yeah.
saying, like, I'm fine approving this one if it doesn't contradict the other one. Okay, that being said, anything else? Entertain a motion to approve. I'll make a motion. Sarah makes the motion, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, so moved. And so then, that brings us to the second reading. There are none. Informational only, the procedure around elementary school choice transfer procedure. So that's a procedure, and that's just for information. So now we're going to do agenda preview and prioritization. And
So I think we should move the discussion about Cold Hollow up to after our spotlight.
okay. Is everybody all right with that one? Okay. So that brings us to recognition of visitors, and I don't believe there are any. Okay. Then that brings us to school spotlight. Beth.
So we were trying to decide what to highlight tonight. So I brought it to my continual improvement team. And we really wanted to highlight some of the project-based learning that we've done. And I wanted to bring you on the trail, but it was during the monsoon weather a couple of weeks ago. And 6 o'clock in October, I thought maybe it would be dark. And so somebody on the team said, why don't we have the students who did the video do a video of the trail, which was an excellent idea because we're highlighting two sets of skills. We had some students do a crime scene video for the forensics class. So they borrowed, I called Nate and asked if we could borrow some of their equipment, and it didn't work and so I was getting more and more worried that it wasn't going to happen, and they kept saying, don't worry, we've got this. So all of the work that they did, I'm very impressed with it, and I hope you will be as impressed, they did with their phones. So it's Joseph Paquette and Troy Kane. Troy Kane is doing the videoing, and they did all the editing, and they're also entering a video for the Halloween contest that Northwest is hosting. So Courtney's going to show the video.
Hello, my name is Joseph Paquette, and I am a senior at Richford Junior Senior High School. And behind me is the entrance to one of the most innovative community projects we've probably done here, the brand new and improved nature trail. Alright, before we can talk about the new trail, let's talk about the old trail. Now, the old trail has been here for about 2 decades, or 20 years, and it has been used plenty of times by our resident science teacher, Mr. Marlowe. He would take all sorts of biology classes down here in order to test water and do other biological activities for his classes. So we didn't exactly have to make a new trail because this one was old, but it's kind of a safety hazard. You see how all of this is pretty much dirt? Mix this with a little bit of rainwater and you have yourself nature's slip and slide. Of course, you know, all the kids toughed it out, but after a while it kind of does indeed get old. So all in all, how did this idea come to be? Well, those ideas started hatching around, I want to say, last summer, early fall. And we, as a school, started a collaboration with UMatter, not the phrase, but the organization and the acronym UMATR, and the Richford Conservation Committee. So once those ideas were all clear and in everyone's minds, we sent out a grant request to UMatter. And in January of that following year, we got accepted for $5,000. That was enough to pay for lumber, cobblestone, gravel, all that stuff in order to get the trail built. Why don't we take a look? Hey, whoa. You can't go in there all willy-nilly. You gotta read the norms. Let's go over the norms real quick. So our first norm, one of the most important ones, respect nature. Don't hunt the nature, don't hurt the nature, and no picking at leaves. I know it's tempting, but just leave them alone. They'll do what they need to do on their own. Respect wildlife, of course. Respect other users on the trail. Leave what you find unless it is trash. No littering. We have had problems with that, and we don't need you adding to it. Don't leave your fishing supplies if you choose to fish. Stay on the trail. Of course, have fun. And slow down and enjoy the simple pleasures of life. So now we've arrived at the intersection of the old trail and the new trail. And at this intersection, we have a wonderful sign made by Garrett Snyder and Eli Martin depicting some of the wildlife you may encounter out here, such as squirrels, turkeys, snakes. Be careful of those guys. And if you choose to fish, some of the water life consists of most of the trout family. Brown trout, rainbow trout, and brook trout. All right, so keep in mind that all of this part of the new trail now was technically the old trail. It's just greatly improved now. And remember, all of this used to be dirt and mud, and that wasn't very nice for students. But like I said, we all toughed it out, but now we deserve a break. Dan Seeley and Alton Dunnigan, as well as Cindy Dunnigan, were great pieces of our puzzle as we built this. So something you may not have known about the nature trail is it has a path to the river. And since it has a path to the river, it also makes for a great fishing spot. A lucky one, to be exact. This sign here was made by Eli Moody as well as Leland Goodrow. And who knows? They might be right. You can come down and try it. So you may have noticed a lot of students have worked on this since they've made all these signs. And in fact, a lot of students have. All of Mr. Varnum's class, all of Miss Ryan's class, even Mr. Farnham's class all helped out with this during Personal-Based Learning Week of last year. Of course, our great students were only half of our team. We also had a bunch of great members from the Richford Conservation Committee, including Todd Marlowe, Annette Goyen, Jessica Bone, Jen Shenkovitz, Alton Dunnigan, Dan Seeley, and Cindy Dunnigan. So you may notice it is a little sunny out. We filmed on a very bright day, so we apologize if we just blinded everyone in the room. However, I'm sure you could trust me that this is a very beautiful spot. This is the river access point. Countless science projects have been done down here, or biology projects rather. Countless inspirations have been grown here. Countless fish have been caught here, I'm sure. Maybe even a piece of poetry has been written here once or twice. Now, you can't see it, but across the river, over there somewhere, is the old structure of the Atlas Wood Supply Store building. So there's even a bit of history down here that doesn't correlate with the school. Okay, so now that you can see and I can't, I would like to show you this bridge right under me. This bridge was built by two of our key students to this project, Silas Martin and Austin Honey, who worked on it after school had ended and even gotten paid for it. Alright, now that we can both see again, sorry for the sun, I'd like to show you the entrance to the other path. This path leads up and around to the back of the soccer field. Cross-country uses this sometimes. It's a very scenic route. We're not going to show you down it, though, because, well, we want to leave some exploration to you. That's the whole point of a nature trail. Inspiration. Come free your mind, or whatever you want to do. All in all, this was an excellent community building experience for all of us, but especially the students. It was a great community service opportunity, a PBL project, even a paid work experience if you wanted it. So that's what I leave you with. Come visit our trail, come get lost in nature. Not literally though, because, well, we don't want to go find you. But yeah, Have a great day.
Very
What a
good.
personality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I thought they did a great job with the video they did last year. It was quite entertaining for all of us. They were down at the playground and filmed an actual murder. Well, a murder. Yeah, not a real murder. And so the one thing they left out is that Heather Guerin's class made all of the signs. So the middle school made all of the signs that they were showing. And he didn't mention Miss Guerin's class, so I wanted to mention them. And I think that it's also an excellent example or exemplar for evidence for a student doing an extended learning opportunity or trying to prove a standard, through a UDL project or whatever.
Where's the trail actually located?
It's right in the back. So if you drove around the side, there's a tennis court. It's right in back of the tennis court.
Neat. Yeah, that's great. I think he has a career in television.
That's
I kept
what I was
thinking I was
thinking.
watching Across the Fence.
Well, he was entertaining. That's why I was worried that they weren't going to get it done, and Troy emailed it to me today. And when I watched it, Jane was in there, and I was cracking up, and I went, "Oh, they did so much! They did better than I even anticipated."
That was really great.
Yeah, very good. Okay, so now we'll Seth and Nate.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're gonna pass out, we got not final plans, but fairly final plans. And our estimates came back today, and I'm gonna give you guys a chance to kind of look through these. Mostly just the board, I think. Or do you want to? Do you want? Yep. You want a chance to look through, or do you want me to have Seth start talking about the project?
Yeah, let's, yeah, you take us on the show.
Where would you like to start at the beginning?
Why don't you start with the, plan for the sugar house? So let's go to page,
Tell me what page you want me to start on.
yeah,
And I'll
what
start
is
with
that?
that.
It's page, is that page 2?
In the bottom right hand corner, there's A or
A 20, A020.
020. Okay.
Okay, so this is gonna be, I feel like I'm gonna put my D. So this is the external plan,
Yes.
okay? And then the cutout on the side is,
There's an aerial location of where the sugar house is going to be located. Are
and,
all you guys familiar with Old Career Center?
yes.
Do you know where the Red Barn was formerly located?
It looks like, is that it lines?
Yes, that's where the new
That's
sugar
where
house
the
is.
new one is gonna be,
That's
okay,
where the sugar house is going to be.
okay,
On the existing, close to the existing footprint of the Red Barn,
okay,
the building formerly known.
okay. And so I'm looking at the external, the structure.
Yep.
And it looks like we have like a garage bay, that's for trucks, I assume?
The left side is a garage door that section of the sugar house is going to be the tank room.
Oh,
For
okay.
where the raw sap will come in.
Oh, okay,
And we'll see that on the next page. You'll have the floor plan.
okay,
Kind of gives you a layout of what the sugar house, the flow of it, you could say per se. We'll start at that door, which is A100 is that overhead door. When you go into that tank room, we'll have 2 to 3 open top tanks in there for raw sap and then processing. So he'll be able to process his sap in the RO room, and the water will be able to come back into a tank to be able to wash his RO. And then the permeated sap will go above the RO room in a holding tank for the rig, where there's a mezzanine. When we go another page, there's a mezzanine above the RO room and processing room. And so while we're on this page, everything in the rig room, above the RO room and processing room is open to above. So it'll have a big cathedral ceiling.
okay,
The vestibule and restroom and mechanic room will have, that will be all gypsum or drywall finishes,
okay,
painted, ceiling and walls. The rig room will have either, we're back and forth on whether we're gonna do metal corrugated siding or there's a vinyl composite, material that we're talking about potentially using. And on the gable ends, using some kind of, either shiplap or, wood finish. It's all gonna kinda come down to what materials cost at that point of what we're gonna use, you know. I mean, obviously some are a little more expensive, some a little less expensive, but that's where we're at. And then storage would be like for empty barrels, powders, syrup jugs that aren't being used, to be able to, and that's not gonna be a heated space, even though it's within the envelope, it's not gonna be potentially heated. Same with the tank room, that whole area is gonna be non-insulated. Any questions on that, or?
Well, I just have some out of just totally curiosity.
Go right ahead, shoot.
So, what kind of evaporator are you doing?
So, right now, we are hoping that Mr. Goss, he's looking into potentially putting in a natural gas fired rig.
Natural gas, okay.
Because we have natural gas, obviously,
Yeah.
utilized rig. That's his, whether he converts the rig he has to doing that. I know he's planning on setting up some meetings with local dealers to see if they can work with him to put a new rig in there.
Right.
But, you know, if we need to, they'll put the old rig in and convert it to natural gas.
Okay. And is it, again, I'm just total
No,
curiosity.
go ahead.
Is
You don't
it,
ask, you don't know.
right, exactly. And is it, I'm gonna get my words wrong, is it like a, is it reverse osmosis?
Reverse
where you
osmosis
capture
is what the RO is.
Okay,
The RO room is the reverse osmosis.
okay, yay,
So,
okay.
we'll bring in the raw sap, which is from the trees, go
Yeah.
through the RO, which is reverse osmosis with
Yeah,
shedding water.
Yes.
And then, so most times you run it through 2 cycles because you wanna get you wanna get the sap down to a higher sugar content.
sugar content, so it's not
So you
so
run it
long,
through
right?
twice, so that way you're not running your RO at such a high, pressure.
What are we doing with that water? Is it
So
expelling
some
or
of
are
it
we
you need
using
to
it?
capture,
Yeah,
to be able to rerun through the rig, or through the RO, and a lot of it is gonna be discharged.
it will be discharged. Okay. I just know some people capture.
Yeah, we have to capture a certain amount to be
Yeah.
able to wash,
Right,
and that's what one of the tanks will be, in the
Got
tank
you.
room will be,
Right.
to capture that.
and I also, I guess I asked that question one out of curiosity, but two, when we think about like wastewater allocations,
Mhm.
it's not like we're just dumping into the
Yeah,
system,
and I've
right?
been in talk with, we're in the process right now with the state,
Right,
getting our wastewater permits, and, I've talked with this town, the village about what our wastewater permit would look like with them and our allocations, and, they've asked for us this sugaring season to, sort of, take some samples of what our water tests like,
right,
and what it reads, and what our, like, when we wash our rigs out afterwards, even though there shouldn't be much sugar content, take a sample of that, and then when we use our acid, take a sample of that in our rigs, and when we, do the wash water in the RO, what that looks like, so that way they have a reading of what it's gonna be going to them and what they're gonna be receiving. But they're very supportive on whatever we can, and they said
right.
that even if they come up with a number, you know, what our allocation is, that they would revisit it once we're up and going, so we have much more accurate numbers of what we are putting in for water, because obviously, we don't know, Goss is gonna be going to a new, sugar bush, so we don't know what the sugar content is gonna be out there, and how much, you know, he's going from a woods that's 2.2, I don't wanna really say it out loud, you know, sugar maker.
Exactly.
But,
Don't share the secret.
what he might be going to a woods that's 1.5, and he could be shedding a lot more water, you
Right.
know, and not yielding as much syrup. So, you know, there's variables that are unknown right now because he doesn't know, because he's going somewhere new.
And another reason why I ask is, particularly when you start like expelling significant water, even with like washing, sometimes they just don't even have the allocations to give you. And so then you run into like, then what, right? So, okay, that's interesting. And let's see, what else do we have here? And then, yeah,
So just
please.
to clarify, you may, like, once you know how much you're outputting, you may have to buy more water allocations if Colorado doesn't have enough already allocated.
It may, but
May not,
I
may
think
not.
it's, talking to them, they're gonna be on the conservative side to start with, so
Oh.
it's gonna be in our favor, I think, you know, of what we're gonna.
They're gonna
And
stick
obviously,
high.
some of this water he can capture to use and wash and rinse and do things with, but some of it you're gonna just have to get to us, you know, coming to us from them.
Right, Okay. Okay, does anybody have any questions regarding like the footprint before we get into numbers?
I think that there was a question that Rick had brought up
Yeah.
previously about the exterior door in the back of the space for safety reasons.
Oh,
And I
right.
just had a little side conversation, we're not supposed to, it was very clarified.
So if you go back to page, second page, page A010, there is a little dotted line that comes from the back processing room through the doorway of the processing room to the front door. And that is under the allotted number of feet, so you don't need a second means of egress out the back. Technically, we do have a second means of egress that we could go out the tank room, but that meets the allocated number of feet to be able to get out and get to safety. So that's why we don't need a door back there.
Okay.
The reason you don't want a door back there?
I personally, I wouldn't want one because of security purposes. You know, everything right now faces the driveway towards Gold Hall and towards, you know, that backside. If you notice, when we look at the drawings, the exterior drawings on page A400, you look at the east elevation, which would that be the backside. Those windows are smaller and higher in the louvers, so that way it's much less enticing for someone to try to get in. Obviously, we have the larger windows in the front, in the RO room and stuff like, in the processing room that are bigger, but at least they're visible by the street and by the school itself in the driveway.
And they can't get out of the tank room, correct?
And they can, I got paid, there's no windows and doors in there.
But someone could leave the
Yes.
tank room.
Speaking of security, are there gonna be cameras in and outside, or just outside, just inside?
Right now, it's probably outside.
Just outside,
The cameras that we have on Cold Hollow would capture that something.
be able to see.
Still keep it.
Okay.
So there probably will be something. Not really something.
Oh, I know. One question I have, which Gabs might have.
So you wanna continue through?
Yeah.
Okay, so if you go to A400 like we looked about, there's a section that you cut right through the building and you're looking back towards the number 5 in the bottom left-hand corner. You're looking back towards the RO and processing room. And one thing when my students met with Mr. Goss and his students is he wanted to be able to be in the rig room and be able to look into the RO room and into the processing room, so if students were in there working, or he could be able to see his gauges and everything that on his RO, so that way he could have, you know, ample glass, and then up above you can see where that railing system is, and that's where the tank will be for remediation set. And then you have a cut through the east and west, so looking above the RO and the vestibule, or where the vestibule is, and that's a hard ceiling, so. And then you have the elevations on the outside.
How many, like, what is your estimate around how many, like, rigs are gonna be coming up and down there to do drops off for staff?
How many rigs?
Yeah,
He'll
like,
have,
what do
you mean like trucks?
Yeah.
He's gonna have the potential for probably anywhere from 1,800 to 2,400 taps. So you're talking one truck with
Okay.
1,000-gallon tank. You're
Okay.
not talking, you know,
You're not
maximum,
talking, right?
you know,
whatever.
we're not gonna boil for 10,000 or
Yeah,
50,000 or anything like that. You know, we're talking
Okay,
at the most 2,500 and maybe 2
So-
trips a day.
so that's a good, I guess, okay, so we're only gonna use the stuff that's coming off the Cold Hollow property, we're not gonna buy into
As of right now.
that, we're not-
Sometimes, yeah, sometimes we bought stuff from students.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
so there's other,
There is some,
Yeah.
but not,
No,
you know,
okay.
we're not
You're
going.
not gonna do like an operation where
No,
all of a
no,
sudden.
no, no.
Center
We're
of
flooding the
town is
market,
gonna
no,
be-
we're not gonna flood the
Exactly. Okay,
Strictly
right.
educational purposes.
okay, perfect. So, does anybody else have any questions about
I have
that?
a quick question. Is there a particular reason why the tanks are gonna be above Up on that second level.
So there's gonna be one 500-gallon tank that's above there, so that way, when your sap's been RO'd, it gives it what you call head pressure, so that way it feeds your rig. It allows, where you're not pumping it, it's just the gravity feeding your rig itself, and that's why you have to get it above your rig, so that way it feeds it itself. It's gravity fed.
Gotcha.
And then the S's, those are kind of like how the building's built, they're the structural details. So the first page, you kind of talk about the concrete and all the guidelines and everything they want you to meet. The next S100 is the foundation plans, what your footings look like, the call out, some pier location, and the grid system, or the trench drain that's gonna be around the rig. I have asked for some updates, because there's a few spots I need to add this, but those are just minor details that, you know, I've asked for, and clarification, before we send it out to bid. And the trench drain, so that way we can have it around the rig, because obviously that's where the most water is produced, and it can be also for us to, when Goss is boiling, he can have his syrup lines underneath, and you don't have that pipe running across where it's going to your tanks, or your barrels to be filled, it's in the ground, so that way it's not tripping hazard, and it's adequate space for everyone to walk around.
Okay. Access, like, you would obviously have access to those, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so the removable
The
grates.
removable grates, right.
But there'll be a floor drain underneath them,
Yeah.
so that way water can go in. And then S101 is structural details of what I have to, or what would have to be built about the framing mezzanine, or above the tank room, and the whole roof system. And then goes into some structural details on S300, whether it's the footing, the walls, the rafters, trench drain detail, nuts and bolts. And then you go into mechanical, heating system, natural gas, like modines. And then the boiler system and the plumbing, which is the P's, your underground plumbing. Again, there's two changes that I've asked that they just haven't come yet, but before we go to bid, those will be there. And they're not anything that's major changes or major price increase or anything like that, they're just minor details. Water service in the building is on P301. If I'm going too fast, it's like, reach out and grab me and tell me.
Okay.
If you want me to keep going, I'll keep chugging along.
So is the plan, this is gonna show my ignorance,
No problem.
but this is what happened. So the plan is to have the rig room open to the vestibule? Or will there be doors there?
No,
I see there's doors there, but I don't know, will you leave those open or not?
no, those would be shut.
Okay, yeah.
So like, that'd be kind of like a entranceway to like school or to a business. That'd
Yeah.
be like your
Oh, yeah,
foyer,
yeah, yeah,
you know, you kind of
okay,
walk into that area.
right, okay.
There's some teaching tools in there, you know, some past history of how it was before and what it is now.
Oh, yeah, okay.
We figure there's gonna be tours and whatnot, and that's where they're gonna start,
Yeah.
so.
So you wanna know where my ignorance was coming from? I was like, thinking about sheetrock in a place that
Creates
boils
moisture?
sap.
Yeah. No,
And
those are two
so-
separate rooms.
Okay,
So,
that's
yeah.
what I was thinking, yeah.
But again, there's two large windows on the north of the two large doors in the vestibule. There's two large windows that you can stand in the vestibule and look into the processing room or the rig room. So, rig room. But again, depending on what type of students and sizes and stuff like that, they can stand in there first, and then, you can also be able to bring them into the weight room, in smaller groups or, larger groups, but they can start there and not be in the way, depending on what's going on.
Okay, are there any other questions before we look at specifics?
If you go to, like, way in the back, the
Yeah.
C 2.0.
Yeah.
It gives you the where and how the sugar house is located on the, property. We twisted it enough so that way it matched up with the existing driveway that comes around Cold Hollow. So that way a truck could pull into that and then back straight into that driveway, so that way there's
Oh, yeah.
less maneuvering and twisting and things like that. We also moved the building back because of the existing gas line that's already in there. So we hit our back, we're not on it, but we're very close to where it's set back on the back southwest corner of the building. And then you can also see on this where there's the water service that goes to the new building, and then also a future water service that would go to the construction building, same with the sewer line. And those would basically allow us to do the digging in the driveway once and have it into a green space where it's easily accessible and less impact to later on.
Okay. Right. Let's get into the estimate report. So I'm looking at, so this is all based on what you've just shown us. And
And these numbers are all, right, these numbers are all basically saying if we were to send it out to a general contractor and we had subcontractors come in and do this as if it was a normal project. Not a normal project, but a normal project, not student involved. Because there's certain
Right,
areas that I'm
right.
gonna be able to do
Yeah.
with my students that the numbers are not what's on this paper, it's gonna be less.
why are the numbers all repeating the same?
There is some that do repeat in certain spots, I did see that.
Like 2 pages, 3 pages. Of this, see, on page like, it's all 2163. Oh, square feet.
Square feet.
Yes.
That's why it doesn't change.
Look to the right, look to the right.
Okay, fine, total.
You can stay right there, I like that
I
number,
was like,
okay?
why is it the same? Are they just saying, yeah, it'll cost this much? All right, there we go. Okay, and so I'm seeing on the end of the page, oh no, on the back, okay. That there is a total. Okay, and remind me the plan.
There's like 6 different plans.
Okay,
So, if you want, so last time we met, we talked about incorporating into a bigger plan.
yes,
So, if we were to do just the, so I'm gonna give you kind of all the options.
Yep.
So if we were
Good.
just to do a sugar house plan,
yep,
then because of the timing of it, we need to get started as soon as possible to try to have it done before this next sugar season. So-
and remind me again why the timeline.
The timeline is because our lease with Ward Henneveld ends at the end of 2023. So, he wants us to have, so after this sugaring season, we'll be taking, all of the equipment, all the staff lines, all the wiring out of his woods.
So it's not tied to any like grant money or anything that we just because we're not gonna have a place to sugar.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so the initial thought was, use capital reserve funds. And I'm gonna one of my asks tonight will be, can we begin using capital reserve funds to get the site work, the concrete, and allow the construction class to begin framing? Because that would give them a project to be, they'll honestly save a lot of money, but, all that framing can be done in-house and be ready to go in the spring. And so the site work, concrete, and,
Underground plumbing and electrical.
municipal,
Yep.
right?
So, I'll go on, Morgan.
I was gonna say before, Nate goes too much farther, I know that Holly, you and Mort were there for the initial walkthrough 3 years ago, whatever it was. I think you were there, but you weren't. So we had looked at a lot of different options when the ADA findings came down for Cold Hall.
Right.
That was sort of the trigger that we need to do some major work here. We did the walk around there, we had Black River come in, we kind of went through the vision, which involved the sugar house and involved putting the construction program out to the second building. And then using that extra space to expand some of the programs there.
Right.
The price tag for that came back to between 10 and 17 million, depending on
How much?
10 and 17.
Okay.
Depending on how much work we wanted to do with stuff. And so I think just because Nate is who he is, that River set him back.
Right.
We also have been hearing throughout that time of potentially money coming down for tech centers for building projects, and nothing has come through yet, but that was always in the back of my mind. So that kind of spurred the conversation about chunking this out into different projects, and that's where we got the moving the pole barn, and then, which is completed, and then the sugar house as separate, the construction outbuilding is separate, and then finally the renovations to the main building as separate.
What about being in ADA compliance? Is
We
that
are-
checked off?
Yes.
We've been
Okay.
checking that,
Okay.
we being Vernon and Nate.
Okay. Okay,
So,
yeah.
so option one is capital reserve funds immediately so we can get started.
how much?
I would say not to exceed 200,000, is that accurate?
Till when? For this year?
Yeah.
Oh, for capital reserve.
Right.
This calendar year.
Calendar year. So, then there's a couple options. There is a general fund option,
Right.
which Rick was talking about how $400,000 is not gonna be paid for a bond.
Right.
And so could that be allocated to the Sugar House project?
Okay.
And that's just the Sugar House project, and that probably has to be a little bit more. Option two, larger package, and not go through general fund, go through a bond. The construction building, we got a quote today, it'd be about 1.5 for the construction building. You could put the rest of the Sugar House into that, and if we want to do all the projects that are on phase 5, page 4 of this, the upgrades, Vern has worked hard at getting many of the estimates, but again, nothing is going, you can't get everything right in that amount of time. But we want time if funding for the Sugar House happens, so we can start that. Vern, I'm sure could get the rest of these quoted out in a timely manner, and we could have a larger bond that I know I'm hopeful it'll be under the 10 million from the original, to upgrade Cold Hollow, have the construction building, and give us the classroom space we wanted. So the three options again are capital reserve, general fund just for the construction, just for the Sugar House, that we could start immediately. Option two, I believe, and Morgan, jump in anytime if I get these options on. Capital reserve funds to start the Sugar House, bond vote for a bigger project, which would be the rest of the Sugar House and the construction building. Or option three, capital reserve to start the Sugar House and a larger, more accurate bond vote for the construction building and all the upgrades for Coral and Career Center.
I need to clarify.
Okay,
So, option one was capital reserve funds of 200,000, and the rest would come from what we're not paying in a bond payment,
and,
from the
yeah,
general fund,
potentially, yeah, so that's like 400,000, so I
right?
think we're thinking that because it wouldn't affect the overall budget.
No, that would be like 600,000,
It'd probably be up another 200,000.
right? Okay, so that's option one, capital reserve and general fund. The second option was a bond vote,
Capital reserve, so we could start,
capital reserves to start, and then bond vote.
correct.
For that
For the
plus
sugar
the
house.
1.3 for construction.
Yeah, I don't think you'd want, I mean, I don't know if you'd wanna do a bond vote for 600,000.
No.
Right.
Right,
But is option 2 including the construction,
Option 2 would include the construction building.
which you said came in at 1.3 today? So it would be both projects.
It was 1.2 to 1.5,
Okay.
so I would just,
For the construction building.
for the
for the
construction building.
construction building. And then the last one was a bond vote for the sugar house construction building and revamping the coal house.
Correct.
Okay,
So I think,
so,
So do you want a little, some more background
yes,
before you
please,
move on? So you've got $500,000 in your capital reserve fund.
500,000.
So far, you've given us permission to spend $80,000 on the boiler for Coal Hollow, which came in at 78. And then you've given us permission to spend 70,000 on site work at Coal Hollow for this project. I don't know what we have in there yet. So far, I've not put any of those costs to the capital reserve fund, because if we get to the end of the year and we can pay for it in the general fund, we're gonna say that's great, and we'll leave the capital reserve fund. Okay. But,
Wait, I'm sorry, can you do that last whole part?
Sure. So we got the $78,000 bill for
Yep.
the boilers today.
Yep.
I didn't pay it out of the capital reserve fund.
Okay.
I paid it out of the general fund.
Oh, okay.
And in June, if it looks like we're gonna overspend the general fund, I will pull that out.
Okay,
That's just a tactic to try to keep that whole.
okay,
So potentially, there's 150,000 going already to that $500,000, but we may not need all of that, and 70 of it is kind of already tied to this project. There's this weird $40,000 that we got on June 30th that, as far as I can tell, the state had some money that was expiring, and the governor wanted to push it out to tax centers. So there's this kind of pot of money that Nate just has to spend. We talked about that, as either relieving pressure on the general fund, or that could, help to pay for some of this. It's not big enough to cover the sugar house, but it's a chunk of change. I think you're gonna have about 186,000 in money left over from FY22. So that's the money that you go to the voters and say, either it's all going back to taxes, or we want some of this to go in capital reserve fund. So you've got some money potentially going into the capital reserve fund.
okay.
As Nate mentioned, as Rick tipped, this is the first year we're going to be taking out that $410,000 bond payment.
Yeah.
That, if you don't offset that with other expenses, that's gonna be a big dip to your tax rate, sort of right at the cusp of when you start getting benefits for equalized pupils. So I think that Lynn and I are gonna be advising you to think about how you don't, what steps you're gonna take not to tank the rate, and then have it shoot up.
Well,
So that's kind of the capital reserve
Yeah.
fund and the general budget fund. In terms of going to a bond vote, if you wanted to vote for anything, it would be, I think, a sprint to try to get something on the ballot by March. And it would be very squishy numbers for what we're talking about for the main building. So I'm not really in love with that idea. It seems to make, in my mind, it makes more sense to take the construction building and the main building and plan on doing that as a bond. And maybe we get good news in the meantime about other money coming down for tax centers. But you know, those are both projects where a normal general contractor type of contract makes more sense. And kind of running that as a traditional project.
Right.
So I think with up to 200,000 in the capital reserve fund, you know, maybe some chunk of that 400,000 in the general fund, as long as the timing works out, because that money won't be available till July 1, and then potentially more going into the capital reserve fund in March.
This might be kind of a crazy question, if your computer brain can do this, but what kind of payment would we be looking at in the 1.5 bond? Would it equate what we're spending on the current bond?
It would be less than that.
It would be less than that.
So that's if you only
Yeah,
do
that
the
was-
construction and not the
And-
cold hollow retro.
Correct,
Right.
it's just the construction in the sugar house.
Yeah, I think that was about a $10 million project. Nobody
Which is
was
Depending on
around for that.
Depending on what we did.
No, I mean, the high school renovation 20 years ago.
Right.
I think that was.
So what I'm
maybe
basically
10 million.
saying is like, we're gonna be saving $400,000 on a bond payment we're not making. Would that 400,000 cover a bond payment for 1.5 years? Like definitely less. So if we bonded, we would be potentially we could use our capital reserve for other major projects in the district. And then still get the sugar house and the construction building paid for with less money than we're expelling currently for a bond.
You could, again, the timing is the issue
It's the timing.
for the sugar house piece.
But is the timing just that they may not trigger for a season?
That would be, yeah, I mean, that would be the time, I mean, I think if the sugar house, yeah, that would be the most, that would be
Right.
the most
It
amazing.
also means that staff needs to find different work for his kids.
Because if I don't have this, I know, like, I'm starting over, I'm at scratch and I have nothing. 'Cause this was my, claimed to be my starting project.
Oh,
at the
I
beginning of the
see,
year.
for
For my construction
for your
program,
construction.
yes.
I got a 1854 farmhouse that would love your attention. So, okay, I see what you're saying.
I mean, I had hoped to have this, there's some things that delayed in getting where I am now.
Yeah.
So, you know what, I'd hoped to, when I set out at the beginning of this timeline a year ago, that I wanted to be hopefully putting walls up by the beginning of the school year, so that way I wasn't in a crunch time of where I am now. Where if I can at least start erecting, or at least start fabricating walls and panelizing them, so that way if we do get the break ground and get some concrete in, I can maybe get some walls set. If not, I cover it with hay and poly and try to get the first nice day in April or May and
Right.
get on it then. But if I can at least get if I get it stayed mild enough and nice enough, we could. But Mother Nature tells us that.
Right,
so.
exactly. Do we have questions around, where are we leaning?
I was just gonna ask a question, you had said that Ward, is ending his lease, it's not possible to, like, because of the timing situation, it wouldn't be possible to extend for a year?
Maybe.
Okay.
So that's gonna go through this next sugar same season, and at the end of that, then you're.
Right. 2020, we have until the summer of 2023
Right.
to be moved out.
Oh,
So 2024,
Right.
spring, you wanna be up and running.
Yes.
but you're thinking it's gonna be too much of a hustle to get a bond going for town meeting then?
I think you were saying too much of a hustle to get a bond, with these, not, for just the construction building, I think it'd be fine. For, converting the construction space to an auto room, removing solar wall,
Yeah,
and all those
right,
things,
right,
might be the hustle.
Yeah, and so you could we could be bond ready if it was just the sugar house or just the sugar house and the construction building. But in my mind, then you're killing any chance of going back again in
Right.
2 or 3 years for the remainder of the
redoing.
So that's what I was gonna point to, is that I think you at least need to have the conversation of what you're interested in doing in terms of the overall project, because Maureen's exactly right, like, once you do one bond, you're not gonna get the community to support you to do the rest of it, so what I hear Seth saying, what I think is another option is, so option 3 was like bonding the sugar house construction and then the revamp of Cold Hollow, but I wonder if there's a, like, 3B, which is doing, like, releasing enough money so that they can get started and do the site work and all of those other pieces, and then bond the remaining sugar house construction, and then
Right,
consider the other part.
that makes sense. Yeah, cause my inkling was, let's go the bond, but you're right, you're not gonna be able to go back
I
and.
mean, is there,
Realistically, if you can get the municipals punched up through that slab,
Yeah,
then these guys could mess around with this thing and start getting it up.
Yeah.
Start, like Rick Seth says, start fouling up the walls and be able to set them on there. I mean, whether or not we can get it done, I think we could.
yeah.
Um,
So when you're asking for the capital reserve fund, you were, so you said you want 200,000 to do the site work, the concrete, and the electrical. And
Underground plumbing and underground electrical in the building itself,
And so
nothing,
the remainder money, that's the ticket price on this, we would either wrap it to a bond or find it somewhere in the general fund,
Well,
Or
you
budget
budget
it
it,
for next year.
or budget it now for next
which
year.
would mean though that you wouldn't have access to that money until July 1,
Yeah.
for that extra
So we're-
400,000
so we're hoping that 200,000 gets us to
to July
July
1.
1.
And then you have that other pot of money that you could also utilize if they needed.
Right, the 40,000, right,
Potentially 240.
okay,
So another reminder on the capital reserve fund, and if this is still on the table, if not, you can help me out after the meeting, but we're talking about the forestry program, I think, paying that back
right,
over X number
A
of
number
years.
of
as they
years,
make
right.
that, so
right.
it does,
Yeah, that's still on the table.
does keep it in.
Goffin wanted to mention that, but it's on.
Okay, right.
It's been a year.
Well, so that's the other piece too, is, right. So we can approve using the 200,000 per that they get approval from.
and DRB's waiting on you,
Right.
because they to you
No, I
they said
know,
yes,
that's
yeah.
why I thought you were putting her before the horse when you went there, but.
So I think you can assume that any time we move on a project, we're doing it with the
Right,
blessing of whatever authorities.
right,
We can put that in any sort of motion.
no, right, exactly.
A lot of inspectors that will have their
Right.
hands in this pie.
Because, I mean, how it could have shook out was we're like, yep, too big, make it smaller, right? And then you have to go back to DRB and back to us, right? But we didn't say that, so that's good. Yeah, I'm feeling like the capital reserve option, get them going is, is that how you're leaning? Yes. Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Do we move on that?
So
Can
Oh.
you just clarify one more
Yes,
time
yes.
what that is starting? Like
That
the
is
program is starting just the site work or just the sugar house?
Once we're approved.
Yes. Okay.
Yes, site work, so 200,000.
So site work, foundation, underground, plumbing and electrical within the foundation.
Site work, concrete work, and electrical and municipal.
No, not the hookup yet.
Oh, no, but just electrical.
Just
And
within the foundation,
Basically, we're
nothing
just gonna stub everything else.
to stub everything out, and then
Gotcha.
to allow framing to,
So you can frame that.
because I can frame, once I have that, then I have something to start from.
Right,
And I can start framing as soon as you say, and so then I can be doing that at a different location with the pole barn used to be. So I can start having the walls there, and with my manual labor, we can bring it over and erect it up.
Right.
So I think your motion doesn't need to be that specific, I think it needs to be a dollar amount, because if that work hall costs
No, exactly.
$150,000 and Seth has great weather and Mark wants to go to stick and stuff and buy 2x4s. I don't want to be the guy saying, well, no, that board actually said you can only do this.
No, it would be like a dollar amount, yeah. So, I guess we're looking, so does that make sense?
Yes.
So I would be looking for a motion that authorizes, the use of $200,000 of the capital reserve fund for the building, for the starting of the sugar.
And
Are you
something
putting-
about Nate and I will direct Nate and I to figure out the
And with direct, yeah,
because we haven't done any work on that yet.
right.
But are you putting your loan in the motion?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, I just didn't hear you use the word loan.
Oh,
In your motion.
loan, correct. Sound like my mom. This is a loan, right? Yes. No. So, authorizing the loaning of $200,000 from the capital reserve fund in order to start the work on the sugar house.
I'll make a motion.
Sarah makes the motion, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? Right.
And then we'll get together on the rest of it.
So what does that look like? So get together on the rest of it. Are you wanting to put together?
So I think we will, I believe it looks like when we bring their first real look at the budget next month, we're gonna have
The
a
comp-
chunk of money in there to continue this project by 24.
Okay,
And then as we get farther along in that process,
we may
that'll be
set,
up to you about whether you want
whether we
increase or
want,
decrease it.
right. Right.
So is there an ask that you want of, so this phase 5, are you wanting any work done on, do you want to consider if you're going to go to bond, going to bond for the rest of the project too, is what I'm asking. So is there work, if that's something that you're considering, there's probably work that you would want them to get started on to consider that.
For just the sugar house?
For
or-
everything.
Yeah, Vern and I are still working on phase
The
5
whole
for a number,
thing.
so,
Okay.
I don't plan on stopping that train.
Because you identified, this goes back to the 3 years ago when you identified, we've got some fundamental issues with Cold Hollow and they have needs throughout the building. Nate has been using some of that extra money to piecemeal that, but it's not taking care of the infrastructure part, so in getting them that extra space. So is that a plan or a thought you want to abandon, or do you want them to
I don't think we
continue to
want to
explore?
abandon it. I mean, it needs to be, if we're gonna continue to use Cold Hollow as a tech center, it needs revamping. I just, timing of bond, but,
I mean, it's convenient when bonds line up with when you already have a vote happening.
right. Well, it won't be
Doesn't
this
have
one,
to.
right?
You could do bond vote.
So, right, what are you looking for, like a year? Like, what are you looking for?
So I have no idea, I just wanna know, like, is the board interested in continuing to explore that? To consider whether or not it's palatable to explore for the construction program and the rest of the Cold Hollow? Should they continue to do that work to explore whether or not that's gonna be something you all wanna consider bringing up to bond for?
What are your thoughts?
And I would feel like you need to continue that work, not necessarily to go to bond, but if
Right, 'cause-
something else comes down the
right,
pipe,
that's-
we wanna be.
So that's why I guess I was
relatively
stuck
ready.
on your question, I'm like, I don't know if like bond, because for instance, we don't know what kind of money's coming down.
Right, I'd still like to work with Vern on
We
getting
don't
these
know
numbers
like
and
all these
continue
pieces to
keeping
the
the loop,
puzzle. Right,
So-
so
But you want them to keep
keep
exploring
exploring
that.
that we need to make that whole into
Okay.
a,
Yeah,
revamp.
with Vern's connections.
You got an aging building that you
Yeah,
really haven't
no,
done, I mean,
exactly.
but, like we talked about, 6 months ago, you gotta start
Right.
at the infrastructure and fix that and then,
Yeah.
grade up, but, I mean, it's an aging,
No,
it's an
for
aging
sure.
building and it's gonna need some attention soon. And let's
But-
face it, the trades are hot right now, so you might
Yes,
as well keep on
I
pushing.
know, and so that's, again, maybe money will talk in that area too, so that, I guess, I don't know, how do you feel, like, I mean, I say continue with it, I think you need to, but as far as like when, I don't know, or how much, I don't know. Is that too vague?
They can keep, bring it back next
Yep.
month, do what you've done and.
Yeah, we'll keep on plugging away and getting some solid numbers. Now, there was a, you guys went through and did a, you went through that building a few years back
Yeah.
with the
Black
Black
River,
River as well, so
yeah.
maybe we can
Yep.
kind of revisit that and see.
Yeah.
And
We
there's
have
a
a
lot
we have
of different options, but they were
Right,
costed out 3 years ago, so.
right. But the only thing that I would say, just because we've gone through this process, it costs money to have these things done. So, those numbers 3 years ago are not good for this
No, I
year,
know
so.
that too.
I mean, if we're serious about it, then I say, well, let's spend the money and have it done, but if we're not serious about it, it doesn't make any sense to throw that money away.
Yeah. Thank you. I think we're good, right?
Good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. That brings us to Morgan.
Alright. So you should have received the financial report directly by email this month. I've started to pull some of those construction-y type projects out, but I've not done your billing for high school students yet. That'll probably be this week or next week, and so, that's really the point where I go to you and I go to your principals and say, either this year, spend what you want, or where do all those high school kids go, start spending money. So that'll be next month's conversation, but I'm happy to check on some questions on the report as it is. And if you didn't get it by email,
We did.
okay.
Yeah. Okay.
The auditors finished up their fieldwork last week. We are still answering a lot of questions by email. We do not anticipate any findings of a financial nature, maybe one of a programmatic nature. Enosburg-Richford audit, and we're still discussing that.
Programmatic in effect, like your software, like program?
No,
No, you mean programmatic, like how we're.
Yeah.
Okay,
and I should go into any more detail on that.
and that's okay, I guess.
But in terms of the finances, no clouds on the horizon there.
Okay.
For the FY24 budget, I'm gonna do a brief slideshow for you. And this is one that I will be kind of bringing back to each of your meetings and going through probably a little bit more each time. We're at the very beginning of the process right now, so not a lot of details here, but I wanted to at least get you started with it. So in terms of the schedule, at your November board meeting, I will be bringing your first look at expenses. At that point, it will primarily be personnel, proposed changes from your building principals, some of the bigger ticket items like whatever Nate and I come up with for Fort Hollow, and some of the more costly facilities projects that Vern's been identifying. If you want to try to wrap into that budget, we will do it at the first meeting. The tax commissioner will release the yield proposal on December 1st. And for, I think this is your first budgeting round on the board. So there are 4 numbers that set the residential tax rate. The first one we get is the the yield proposal to the tax commissioner. That is a proposal, we won't know the final number until May or June when the legislature adjourns after town meeting, and it is not an election year, so it'll probably be mid to late June. Second board meeting on December 13th, that's when we will start to look at the revenue side of things as well. 2 days later, on the 15th, we will get your first look at the equalized people numbers. That's the second number that impacts your tax rate, and that's one that a lot of years it has the biggest impact. And so that's a weighted rate of the number of kids you've had for the last 2 years. And it's weighted because kids living in poverty cost more to educate than kids not living in poverty, so they kind of treat the scales with their people numbers for that and a few other categories. The CLA numbers are dropped at the end of December. That's the third number that goes in there, and that's when we have zero control over. And that one is generally final when we get it. The 10th is the meeting that we should be finalizing the your budget and signing the meeting.
January 10th?
January 10th. The January SU meeting is scheduled after that, and so if the supervisory meeting doesn't set their budget in December, we can't set our assessment, which is a big number in your budget. So sometimes we have done most of the work at that first January meeting and then call and put you on for after the SU meeting. So you can file that number and then and then board petitions are due on January 30th. Rick's seat was gonna be up anyway, and in Richford, I think it's more.
Am I up?
I don't think so. I'll check and.
Right there.
And then your annual meeting, I assume, will be in person again this year, that's February 23rd. And then the vote is March 7th. So this slideshow, I think, is going to morph into something that you can use with your voters. So I started out with general budget objectives for the board. The first 3 board goals are the board goals set by the supervisory union. So I feel like those are pretty easy ones to add. And this will be up to you guys to tweak as we move along. And then, one of the discussions that we've been regularly having at the board level is kind of addressing some of the inequities in offerings between the 2 high schools. And work on that. So I put that in there as a placeholder. We can take it out, we can replace it, we can add others. This is kind of a catch-all for some of the big picture situations that we're going to be dealing with when it comes to setting the budget. We know that we're coming out of COVID, that we've got more kids with social emotional needs, and that is definitely putting a strain on staff, and at least at the SU level, kind of impacting how we think about staffing. The change to equalized pupils will start to take effect the following year. Trying to make sure that you're positioned for that extra capacity that you're going to have as you start to see that equalized pupil number go up. Roughly the same time at the SU, the COVID funding is going to expire. So our SR1 grant ended last month. SR2 ends in September. That's the $2 to $3 million one, and then ARP SR ends in Fy25. So it kind of dovetails nicely with those pupils coming in, but it's very relative too. The change in the special ed funding formula started this year, and we're kind of transitioning into that over 2 more years. So the hope is we'll continue to see increased funding compared to past years, and we'll be able to at least keep that special ed assessment level. It's coming at a time when we're pushing a lot more expenses to the SU, so it may look like a larger assessment, but cuts in the local budget as well. We've talked to you before about the PCB, potential for PCB remediation. We so far have had one school get tested, that's Richford Elementary. The tests were picked up, I think, a week or a week and a half ago, and we're just waiting for the shoe to drop on that. It'll probably be before your next board meeting, we'll have some information. Berkshire and Enosburg Elementary are next on the list of schools to get tested. They've done a site visit at Enosburg Elementary, but I've not heard anything from that, and they haven't put the actual testing units in there. And then your two high schools in Cold Hollow are kind of coming to at the end of the cycle, so that'll be
Later in 23,
a ways
24,
out.
I think.
Yeah. But we may be coming back to you next month with some big ticket items for Richford Elementary, and depending on what they find there, we may try to get ahead of the curve in Enosburg Elementary. On that. I don't know if you're gonna go into PCBs later, because we haven't had any test results yet, we don't really know what it's gonna look like, but there are different acceptable levels for different age groups, and from what we're hearing around the state, there are different sort of levels of problems. So it could be that they come into Richford Elementary and say, no, you just can't have your pre-K kids anymore here until you do this, but everyone else is okay. They could come in like they did in Burlington and said, stuff is in your ground now and it's a major project.
So the thing with PCBs is over time it leaches into other materials. So it might have been, in a wall, but it might have leached into your windows and down into your concrete or mastic or whatever.
Right.
So that they don't, one of the things that we've learned from their two buildings that are already going through it, they were the first tested, is that this first test, if there's a finding, that's just phase one. So they come in if there's a finding at Richford Elementary School, and then there'll be other testing that happens. So if it's found in a room, then they'll test to see how far it's spread into the building materials and things like that. So we may be positioned to have to make some quick decisions in response to this testing. Do you want to talk about funding, or do you want me to just mention that?
I'll let you do it this time.
Okay. So the legislature passed some emergency remediation funding for these early schools. So we're in the early school pile. And the schools that are right now trying to access that money, it's like $2.5 million. They did not set any metrics for how to physically access the money. So the schools that are needing it right now cannot access any of the money because there's no agreement on how it actually gets released.
Right.
So the legislature has more money that they're putting towards the remediation and testing, their attention, but it won't be until after the legislative session begins. So there are some problems inherent in the planning around PCB testing and remediation, and we're likely just going to be at this level trying to figure it out.
Right.
That was way more charitable than how I presented it
Yeah.
the last
I try.
The universal meals bill was passed in the last session. That was granting universal meals to all schools in the state. They did that without a long-term funding source. So they're coming back in this session to try to figure out how to fund it next year. That may have a negative impact on the food service budget at ESU. I think it's good for us for going into this year. I think we'll have some reading room on that, but we don't know what that looks like in the following years. And then finally, we are going to be rebidding our transportation contract. The contractor is interested in working with us. They were not interested in rolling it over for the percentage that they can roll it over, which to me says that your transportation contract's
It's
gonna
gonna
go
go
up.
up for sure.
I am hoping that we will have that contract bid out by December, January.
Okay.
That's also a pretty quick turnaround. And so as we go through the discussion, if there are things that you want to add to this list so that we can highlight it, right, that's great. I've got enrollment projections in here. Lynn will be talking about this a little more in detail in her section, but everything from 2018 to 2022 is actual October 1st numbers, and then going from 23 on is sort of rolling out a projection based on historical trends in terms of how many kids come back from year to year and where you've got your bubble classes now.
Can I just clarify that graph, Morgan? The color of the word for the school is the color of the graph. It's a little confusing between Enosburg Elementary and Richford High School.
So Enosburg Elementary is yellow and Richford High School is green.
Oh, okay.
And then 2020, just to point out, this was COVID.
Yeah.
So we saw a pretty significant dip in previous schools and And then finally getting down a little bit more into the nitty gritty, we settled the teacher master agreements last spring, so this will be the first year we're actually budgeting, knowing what those numbers are. So you'll see a bit of an increase budget to budget based on where that ended. We will be negotiating with the support staff over the next several months. That probably won't be settled before the budget's warned. And so we're gonna have to make some assumptions on where the negotiation team is likely to end there. We don't have projections yet for health insurance premium increases, but the hospitals went in and asked for pretty huge increases, and that will just go in direct correlation to what health insurance does. So we'll maybe have a better idea once those rates are deliberated on. As with every year, we look to how many high school kids are getting from the NMB schools, and whether that class is big or small, and whether your graduating senior class is big or small. And that impacts how much money we get from the district. And then finally, now that we've got Vern on board for finding all the things that we should be spending money on, and so as a board, we will get to weigh in on one of those we want to try to start chipping away at.
The hope is we can get to some more longer term facilities planning for all the schools, so it won't have to be in this more reactive mode. Get ahead of it a little.
So more to come on that.
Okay.
I reached out to the town to see if they would roll into the contract at the same price, and they contacted me back and asked if they could increase it by the week, which is that number that comes out.
Great.
I said I'd bring it back to you because that wasn't in my March notes.
And the increase in the need is just like they're allowed to like increase it this much.
By an inflationary amount,
Right,
and we will see that probably in November, December. The number will come out. Historically, it's been between 2 and 3 this year.
I think yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. I don't think I need a motion, and that's all I have.
Okay.
What did you just say yes for?
The cloud contract. Now you're.
Okay. I don't know who's driving. Is it you, Courtney? Okay. I'm gonna start out with personnel. So in terms of hiring, we don't have anything that needs board action in that section. That's all support staff. So do you want me to go through, or do you want to just take a look at it? Okay. So resignations, same thing, those are support staff, informational. Next page, we still have several open positions across the supervisory union, including some classroom teachers. So there are quite a few positions there. All of those are, I don't think you want me to read all of those at this point. I've read them every time and we still have the same ones. So they're all listed on Schools Pay if anybody's looking for positions. I am going to talk under student. I'm going to go into October 1st enrollment numbers, and then I'm going to dig into class size reports. So I will give you the slideshow after, and you'll have each individual school's linked data, but what I'm going to be sharing with you is summary data. So first, what we're going to talk about are October 1 enrollment numbers. So you have the data to take a look at, what are our class sizes across the district, and looking at the totals across the district and the totals in FNESGO. So what we typically report on is how did we compare this year's enrollment to last year's enrollment, and then in that final column to the right, that's the change part. So how many more or less students do we have in each of our schools compared to this time last year? So you can see that we're down 40 students overall across the district. So one of the questions I had was, how does that play into not just the change part, but how do our numbers compare pre-pandemic to now? Because we know we had some students make some shifts during the pandemic into different kind of learning modalities. So you could see that before the pandemic, we had a total of 1,117 students. And right now we're at 1,067. So we saw our numbers go up last year in October of 21, and they've gone down this year. Any questions or comments on?
What does that account for some of the kids who moved in? Wait, if the virtual academy still captures those kids, correct?
They do, but homeschool would not, if you had any that moved out. So next up is the class size report, and this is for your elementary schools. So each year by policy, we have to bring you a class size report. And in your policy, you have a minimum average number of students per class. So you can see at both Richford and Enosburg, they're well above your minimum averages in both of those schools. And we measure for reading and math instruction and then all other content areas. So that's the kind of data that you're going to see here. On the next slide, this is your middle school and how it compares between Richford and Enosburg. Again, you're above the class size in almost every measure. You're slightly below in both of the 8th grade classes, but you're barely below there. They're one student or half a student.
Can I just say something about that? I don't think we'd be below, but I didn't know how to include the STEP students. Because we have
That's a good point, and they're not,
On your accounts either.
they're not showing up on my.
right, so I wrote 13.5, but if I included the 2 8th graders in STEPs, then it would be over.
I would
And-
have.
Yeah, so I think we'd be right about there, but I didn't know how to count them.
Okay.
I also always include a little note of the number of students that just move within our district, because we keep track each year, and over 50% of the students that move in and out in a year are moving within FESU schools. So we're just training all.
It's like a migratory pattern, right, that happens. Okay, so for November, what I'm going to bring to you is the high school report, where we take it class by class, content by content, and look at number of students in semester 1 that are enrolled in, for example, all of the math classes between the 2 high schools. So we will take both Matt's report and Beth's report and merge them, so you can expect to get that data at the next meeting. So this is Cold Hollow's report, so you could see this is for their morning and their afternoon classes. That? I missed me some.
Are any of those kids like repeats, do you think? the morning, like, would you,
Oh,
they're like program
Oh, the rest of the
specific,
program.
right? They wouldn't be in multiple programs.
right.
Okay.
The one thing that we're finding is more and more seniors, because of, credits, if they're gaining proficiencies, they don't need us, so they're dropping us in the afternoon to go right to work.
Right.
So we are missing some, like your business leadership isn't on here.
The rest are not below the 10.
Okay, you only reported on, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, is that what that means? Like 3 forestry students?
There's 3 portions of the senior year.
Oh, a senior.
So the afternoon are your seniors and the mornings are your juniors.
Right. And
But
these are
there's, so
only
there's
the-
no morning?
There's no morning that are lower than 10.
Okay.
So I thought we wanted to report, well, we've in the past, we only report the classes that were lower than the required.
So how about next time we'll do another, I didn't pick this up on this, I was just kind of counting down the left column and I should have tuned into it. Let's bring numbers for each of the programs for
Okay.
November,
Yeah, okay, gotcha.
so we can see it.
Yeah.
So I see why you did that.
I think I thought it was just reporting out the ones that did not meet the
Okay.
standards.
Oh, gotcha.
So all the other programs are more than 10.
Gotcha. I was like, wow, okay.
All right, any questions on that?
Okay.
I have a professional learning that you and I had talked about, and I could do this pretty quickly. So one of the things that has become clear to us is that there are, many schools are dealing with hazing, harassment, bullying, and Title IX issues in their schools. And because of some changes that happened at the federal level, the complexity of some of these situations that we're dealing with in terms of investigative requirements are, they're extremely complex. And we have spent a lot of hours with Heather Lynn, one of the school attorneys who specializes in this, to make sure that we understand our responsibilities through the reporting and investigative process and making sure that we're doing what we are supposed to do to protect kids and to be thorough in our investigations. So one of the things that has come up is the levels of responsibilities across the organization. So the levels of responsibilities for people to report, receive a report, do the investigation, my responsibilities in the process, and there are also board responsibilities in the process. So this isn't something we've ever brought to you before because you haven't had the need to kind of dig in to what your responsibilities are. One of the things that Heather Lynn did to make this more accessible to people is she created toolkits for everyone who has duties and responsibilities under HHB and Title IX. So at the end, I'm going to bring you into your board toolkit. But first, I'm just going to do some quick definitions so we're all speaking the same language. So I'm not going to read all of that verbatim. I'll just read the first part. So when we're talking about bullying, we're talking about any act or combination of acts, could be electronic or not, directed against a student by another student or a group of students, it's repeated over time, intended to ridicule, humiliate, intimidate. It's telling you there it could happen during the school day, at a school-sponsored event, after school. And it does not actually even have to happen on the school property. It could have an impact if it poses a risk to the victim so that it might interfere with their right to access education, okay? So we talk about bullying, that's what we're talking about. Harassment is any incident, and it's telling you verbal, written, visual, physical, or electronic means, and it's based on real or perceived, and it gets into all the protected categories. Race, creed, color, national origin, marital status, disability, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity. Same thing, if it's if it's interfering with the person's access, creating a hostile environment, that would fall under harassment. So Title IX is basically anything that falls under sexual harassment or anything that's on the basis of sex is the definition of Title IX. So you can see that it's there's a list of things that would fall into that category, and it is Title IX is one of the it is the most complex part of law that I think I've ever dealt with. I think the other principals in here would agree with that. Like, it has created a level of work that we've never experienced with investigations and what this triggers before. So it's important that we all know our roles.
Can I just say something about
Sure.
that? So Title IX has two parts, and the first part was passed years ago to make sure girls or women had equal access to sports. And it's like this was tacked on. So I don't like the second part of Title IX because I feel it's covered in our sexual harassment policies and our policies. But I understand the first part that was passed
Yeah.
years ago, but this second part, it's confusing because there's two distinct parts.
But for the purpose of this, we're talking about the harassment part of this. So racial harassment, same, but it would be on the basis of race. So and there, any variety of those things would fall into that category of racial harassment. Hazing is any kind of act that's committed by a student. It's typically connected with pledging or participating in some group. And I think any other questions on any of those definitions is probably enough of a general overview. You're gonna get these slides at the end. So in the statute, there are 8 primary responsibilities of the school board, and responsibilities 1 through 7 are actually outlined in our hazing, harassment, and bullying policy. So you can see that you have policy level responsibilities, policy procedures, publication, notification, education, and assigning designated employees. All of those are in policy, so you're pretty covered there. The piece that we've never really talked through is that if there is a person who there's a finding under the HHB policy, and if there is a parent who wishes to exercise their right to appeal a finding, the appeal actually bypasses me in this situation and it goes straight to the board, which is not typically the chain, but under these policies it goes to the board. So what I've given you in this document is the F30, the policy, that is ours, and then the procedures below it. So I won't go into that today, but it's there for you to take a look at, and you've seen them under policy review before. On the next slide, I'm gonna actually ask Courtney to jump into the BizBit Toolkit. So this is on their website. And if anything comes up, like the website, there's a page before this that really has like principal, superintendent, school board. So we're gonna go into your school board toolkit. And it's very well done. Heather Lynn was very thorough in this, and this is something that I'm quite sure all of your principals have bookmarked to their tab because they refer to it often. We're gonna go down to number 8. And that's about, it's organized so that it lines up with the other numbers above. This is about your appeal hearing. So Courtney, if you could fast forward us to page 12. So you can see in this section that she's broken it down so it tells you exactly all of the things that you need to do as a board. Sorry. 9, it's the next page. So it's telling you all of the steps for the appeal process, and she's so thorough that she's even flagged for you what's your general guidance, what's the letter you send when you receive the request for a board appeal, and then how do you announce your outcomes. So if you look below all of those documents, like so for example, page 19, Courtney, that gives you a copy of the letter that you would send to acknowledge receipt. So it's pretty cut and dry. You would have a hearing. You'd have to have a hearing if there was an appeal within 30 days. And we would make sure that we would go through this in advance of the hearing so that you understood all of your duties and responsibilities. And this, I won't go through all of it because you're not there and probably if we go into that detail right now, when we needed to actually do it under appeal, we would need to review anyway. So it's here for you to take a look at, and to just, my intention tonight was to just bring it to your awareness that that is part of your duty and responsibility as a school board. So if we ever get to that part, we'll kick back into this and go a little deeper to make sure you understand how the hearing would be run. Make sense? If there are no other questions, that's all I have.
Okay. Okay.
We learned not to deviate even on letter. Have it like, we wrote it,
Use it.
just.
Yeah,
That was
exactly.
it.
Oh, I have a question. I actually emailed this to you. So the HHB referral form, are schools obligated to have that available
Yes. You said something about online.
online? Like I noticed ours has one. Is it legally required for it to be anonymous or no?
I think we have to have a way that people can do it. I don't know, I
So-
think your question was about online anonymous.
There's two things, so there needs to be an anonymous way for students to report conduct.
There has to be a.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be online, they just have to have a way to report anonymously if they want to. So for example, in our school, like outside the guidance counselor's office, there's like a drop envelope where students can either like write a note saying a need they have or can report something they want to share. So we have that as an option. There's also a staff and building administrator reporting form. So if we receive a report, in order to determine whether it falls into the box, like the staff member first receives it, needs to fill out their version, and I have to fill out a separate one that's a different version. There's like all of these steps, but there are those types of forms that are a little different than like a student or a parent reaching out.
I had intended to dig a little on that, Polly, and I apologize,
No,
I
it's totally
didn't
fine.
look at the, whether or not it was required to be virtual, like that isn't
Yeah.
something I'm aware of if it's in law,
Got you.
but I
But there
can,
has to be like an anonymous
yes.
piece to it, yeah.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. So that brings us to the principal's report. So we start off with Kelly. You wanna do a little like snapshot of what's going on?
So everything in my board report is informational. The thing I would highlight, and I did mention it in here, is, one of the really big focuses has been just reaching out to the community, so partnering with the community and getting families back into the school. So we did make a commitment in the spring. Some of the work that we did in the spring was the teachers kind of created an outline for a calendar, and we had some non-negotiables. So for example, all teachers 3 times a year are going to invite parents in for a morning meeting. So one of the things that we talked about doing was in addition to, not instead of, but in addition to like the big events that we tend to do, how are we doing more of a sort of slow drip, like get people in and opportunities for people to come in or not have to come in. Like some families can come in for a morning meeting, some families can't, but other families will be able to come in for something else. So we've had families start coming for morning meetings, which has been a lot of fun. Our kids are also, so that's kind of like one of the non-negotiables. Thursday night, we hosted a dinner. So the kids it was a spaghetti dinner and roasted vegetables, and the kids made cookies. So the kids worked on Thursday at cutting up the vegetables and making the cookie dough. And so that was, and they helped serve and to clean up. So that was really well attended.
Wow, that's great.
And so those are just some of the events that are happening in the school, but we're also trying to reach out to the community. So we have this sort of ongoing year-long project where teachers are signing up for a place in the community to go put up a bulletin board. So last month, our second graders went to the library and they went to the town offices, and each class put up some of their work in both of those places. And then this month, we have other grades that are gonna go back, they'll take those down, they'll put up their own work. So there will be bulletin boards around town, in different places in town, that will be, when people will visit, that we'll be able to see sort of, what's going on. Some partnering with Lady of the Meadows, We have a few different classes that are doing some stuff with them. We have a class that sent over some work for their bulletin board. One of our 4 or 5 classes is going to go over and start doing some, periodic things for them. So just trying to really establish opportunities for the kids to get into the community, for the community to see us out there.
Yeah.
And for the community to also come into the school. So that's just kind of a big focus of ours.
Love it. Great.
They've been well received.
Beth?
Everything in mine was informational as well. Our students had a lot of opportunities to go out into the community and do some field trips this month, mostly funded by Gear Up. We're fortunate to be a Gear Up school. And I'm most pleased, I think, this year about the re-engagement in learning and how we've worked since I got here to get students to be more owners of their own learning and more advocates for themselves. And I feel we took a few steps back during COVID and we're right back there. I think kids were more happy about the engagement level and students really taking ownership over their own learning than ever before.
That's great. Jen?
We again are encouraged about the number of people coming back into the school. We had our Title I night, which was hugely successful, and then we had open house. Parents were so glad to be back in the school, and the kids were sharing all that they've learned. So it was exciting. I've been using, I gotta give a shout out to Jody Valancourt and Mary Ellis. They have produced a look for sheet for foundations and reading workshop and bridges. I've been using that. It's been so helpful during my observations to just know quickly what to look for and what to comment on, and I know the teachers are really appreciating it. So that's been going really well, and I really appreciate the work they put into that. The other thing is I'm partnering with Cold Hollow. We have some students from Cold Hollow that hopefully are going to be future teachers. And I think there's 7 of them, and they come every Wednesday. Right now, they're in the observation stage, and there's like 3 that are interested in SEL, and then there's some that are interested in a classroom teacher. And one is really interested in reading intervention and working with struggling readers. So it's really wonderful that they get to come in on Wednesdays eventually. They're even going to write some lesson plans and really get their feet in that. So far, that has been amazing.
Rachel?
Like everybody else, I think a big highlight has been being able to reopen our schools to the community. So we did a ice cream social open house. We really liked the ice cream aspect of what we had to do last year because we couldn't let anybody in the school, so we just kind of made a combination. We got a donation from Ben & Jerry's, so we continue to have more ice cream than we know what to do with for the coming weeks. I know, it's a tough road. The kids are like, are we gonna have ice cream again? Yes, you are. Congratulations.
Where's it being stored?
Not so,
Good question.
and so it was really well attended, it was really positive, it was very informal, it was just like get some ice cream, kids showed their parents around, teachers took turns serving ice cream and being up in the classroom, so, and then we also, just last week, had our school-wide field trip to Mount Mansfield. It's always a really popular event we do as a community builder. It's a really great way to connect with kids. It's kind of challenge by choice, and we had a pretty big group that made it up to the summit and had some time to explore, and they had probably the most beautiful day last week. Thursday was like 70 and some of really, really positive start.
Good. Matt, when?
There's a sense at Enosburg Falls High School that we're putting all the blocks back together again. And helping kids feel like they belong, building predictability, building routines, building belonging, can connection among each other that it's been a big need, and it's, we have to go after it on a few different points. But I think that's why this last week was our Spirit Week, and it was the first one they'd had in 3 years. And it was like, they were all little kids again. It was really delightful. The seniors were so happy to have a lot of those traditions. So they dressed up for theme days, and I have to say that our kids in Enosburg are some of the most spirited kids I've ever seen, and that energy, it was just such good energy. So they dressed up for theme days. We had, we used to have a quarterly assembly, quarterly recap, well, before me, of course, and before COVID, and so now we're trying for a monthly recap where people can see pictures and hear the news about the last month together in an assembly. So we had our start of October assembly, big pep rally last Thursday, and then we also had, this month we have coming up, National Honor Society induction, the Halloween dance, freshman reception probably in November. So it just gave me such a great vibe. It gave me such a wonderful feeling. I continue to feel really proud and honored to have been chosen to come here. And the last shout out that I want to give is to Marty Valander and the coaching. I want to thank those of you who came up with the coaching plan, because specific to my school, we have a new principal, new assistant principal, and I don't know, around 10 or so new teachers. And so I don't think it would have been possible for us all to have been coming up to speed and doing our best in supporting new teachers. So what Marty's been doing in class, I'm singling out Marty. Leslie Rainville works with one of our teachers, but that teacher is actually more experienced. So all of our really new people are working with Marty. And I've seen him, we bump into each other when we go into classrooms. I've seen him working with different teachers. They've been really appreciative to him. And so not only do I think it's a really great investment, I think it's an essential investment. And I am personally grateful that you guys chose this year to go in that direction, because with all the turnover, the struggles of being a new teacher, nobody can do it alone, and Marty has terrific skills too. He sends out a weekly or bi-weekly newsletter, and I read it, and I'm really impressed.
Nice.
Yeah.
And as a person who lost Marty Valander, I don't love it. I just, as much as you like it, I just want to go out there, I don't love the coaching plan.
There's always a yin and yang, right? And Nate, do you have anything to add?
Just real quick, I'll say, I'll give props to Seth. He happened to have a Skills USA advisor meeting in Randolph last Tuesday. And Tuesday night, I got an email from Ruth Durkee from AOE saying the governor's having a press conference tomorrow and is announcing Construction Trades Month. Can anybody make it? And I said, Seth, you're gonna be in Randolph until 11. Where are you gonna be at noon? And he's like, I don't know. I'm like, State House? And so, like Seth, he showed up at the State House, and the governor called out Cold Hollow and the construction trade. Dan French said there's the students from Cold Hollow, and Phil Scott had a 20-minute conversation with all the students at the press conference. Got to know their story, name by name by the end of that, and so that's I think it was on TV, and I think it's also on the curve, maybe a picture of them behind the governor. So
I saw on the news.
yeah, so.
Okay, so board business, SU board representative report. Let's see. Let's pull it up, because I'm blanking. Superintendent evaluation, which we, that's completed, except we present it to Lynn at the next one. Okay. What was, so it was it 9/21? Here we go, I'll look it up. We, jog my memory.
You talked about special programs,
There we go, okay.
childcare.
Transportation, we got Melissa Wood did a spotlight for pre-K, and she was talking about early literacy, and like kind of like grade bands and where kids should fall, in teaching literacy, to pre-K. Really impressed with how she uses data, how she looks at data, and also just kind of like the plan moving forward on how to best get kids to where they need to do, where they need to be, in literacy. Morgan, don't remember what Morgan, maybe financial updates. Lynn talked about personnel, and, shared information regarding, teacher retention and recruitment. And, basically, gave us some data around, exit interviews and, brainstorming ways in which to support both of those, recruitment and retention. So it's definitely on our list. Special programs, what do you mean?
Looking for space,
Oh, yes.
doing study.
Right. So, as we, over the years, have created, these programs in order to kind of remedy outside placement for kids, right? We end up either paying for contracts for outside placement or paying for for kids to go to outside services. We try to create those services within our district, and we
Because of
have
the
done-
long wait lists.
Right,
So we weren't able to get kids to access.
Well, exactly, right, long wait list, but also to think about, could we offer these services within our district? And so, we've done that very well, because now those programs are growing at a pretty significant rate. So, the question came up with, should we pursue looking at some space options for the special programs? And the answer was yes. Did I capture that correctly?
Yes.
Okay. And then, everybody kind of gave their little reports. And then,
Staff childcare is a recruitment.
oh, yes, thank you, right. And so one of the space options, around, talking about space options and teacher retention and recruitment, was looking at a potential, childcare option for staff. And so, the question came around, like, should we be looking for space to do that? And would this be something that the board support doing? The board supported that, in the fact that childcare is such an issue for staff and, the community in general. And that we could potentially, no. Here, no. I don't think so. Am I crossing my wires around potentially using, like, we're not using, but humans?
It might be interesting, part of that.
Like,
Well,
at least, like,
But not
not-
having it be primary, because one of the things we don't want is the human services to be limited to the
no, right.
childcare place.
But just like as a
placement.
learning,
Yes.
right, as a learning experience by having that childcare. Yeah, we did have that conversation. I thought I made that up in my head, but no. Okay. And that was it. That was the summary. And now, back to,
You have,
we have the VSBA resolutions report. So if you go to the link during board business, it looks as though we have, 4 that we need to actually, get feedback on.
can I just set context so that people understand this?
Yep,
Or
yes.
do you want?
Nope. You
So
do it.
Polly has been given, you gave her your proxy, so she's gonna go to that VSBA annual meeting. And at the annual meeting, these resolutions will come before the floor to vote on them. So there's a board of trustees that works for the VSBA, and they've reviewed all of these resolutions that were submitted to them. So as you look through them, there are 6, but really not 6, because if you look down at the bottom, there are some updates, and a few in the beginning were withdrawn. So when you look through these, look for the update at the bottom. The first 2 are withdrawn, and then in gray at the very bottom, it'll give you what the board's recommendation is.
The board being the Vermont School Board.
Yeah, so you don't need to vote on anything, you just need to let Polly know if you feel really strongly that you wanna go for or against the board recommendation.
Right. Should we go through what these are? No. So the first one that I would be asked to vote on is number 3, which basically says, Vermont School Board advocates that the Vermont legislature allocate funds to assist school districts with PCB, which we just talked about, and radon remediation, including districts that those contamination was discovered prior to the legislation and are irrespective costs covered by capital money. So, is everyone okay with that board recommendation to yes, pass that they should allocate funds?
Yes.
The next one would be number 4, which is VSBA advocates that all rules, regulations, policies, quality standards, reporting requirements, and laws regarding public schools in Vermont must apply to any school that receives funds from the statewide education fund for any reason, for any purposes. So basically saying, if you are going to accept statewide education money, you must also follow the rules and regulations that apply. I go with that.
Yes.
And number 5 is the VSBA advocates for significant input on the school district quality standards adopted by the rule of the AOE regarding the business, facilities management, and governance practices of school districts. What? I don't understand this. Is this saying?
So the AOE has indicated that they're going to create assurances, quality standards around business, facilities management, and governance practice of school districts. So the VSBA is saying, the VSBA wants significant input before the AOE does that. It's really the accountability part that Dan has spoken about before, like, he wants to set the standard and then be able to, assure that that standard is being met.
Yes.
So the SBA wants in on the front end before that
Before
gets
those
done.
decisions are made, yes, considering some of the decisions that have been made, the more cooks in the kitchen, the better. Let's see, number 6, the VSBA supports universal school meals in Vermont schools, and the funding should come from a source other than the educational one. Wow. Wow, okay.
Don't ask questions.
I know.
So maybe so.
Support of universal school meals, funding, so yes. Yes?
Yes.
Everybody? Okay, good. So that brings us to, setting future agenda items. Our next meeting is November 8th, which will be located in Enosburg.
You have one more item. You have a resignation from a board member that you need to talk about.
God, he sent it today. I was hoping I could avoid it.
Yeah.
Rick has resigned. I won't read you his letter. He says, Dear UUSD Board Chair, it is with regret that I'm ready to inform you of my resignation from my position on the school board effective immediately. We have moved and I no longer am a resident of Enosburg Falls and therefore not eligible to be on the board. It has been a pleasure being on the board over the last several years and I look forward to seeing the board's future accomplishments. If I can be of any assistance in the future, please don't hesitate to contact me. So, I would like to publicly thank Rick Bartholomew for all of his time and effort on this board. He was a big asset.
He was the kind of board member that it made us all better.
Yeah.
He really, very thoughtful and asked some really deep questions and made us all really think about how we're working to improve our schools.
Great. Absolutely.
So as a board, you have to contend with, you have to fill that vacancy.
Correct.
You're gonna have to appoint someone to fill that vacancy,
And we have how many days?
30.
30 days.
So wondering, Polly, if you want us to, we're talking about it in open meeting, but also post something for if there are people interested in the board seat to reach out to you.
Yes.
And share your SU email address.
Yep.
So if anybody is listening and they're interested in a spot on the ER board, they have to be a resident of the town of Enosburg.
Correct.
To fill Rick's seat, reach out to Polly Rico, and then the board will take those nominations or those interests at the next meeting, and then you can talk about it and
Yep.
appoint one person.
Absolutely.
Does that have to be Enosburg?
Yes.
It does have to be Enosburg.
Just
Enosburg, right? Enosburg resident. Yes. Okay. No, okay. What,
So that person will need to run in March.
correct, so yeah, so anybody who we choose will fill out the remainder of the seat till March, and then they're put on the ballot, in which, the voters would vote for. Or not. So set future agenda items, so I guess that a future agenda item is, going through, any potential board members. Well, it would have to be before that.
Yeah,
How
do
do
you
we
want
do
to do
that?
a little subcommittee that does some, if you have more than a person or two interested, might you wanna have some conversations with those people about what their
Yes, like
interest
what their
is?
interest, why would you want to participate on the board and such?
Do you wanna create a subcommittee of 3 or under?
I think so, because if we're gonna be up against that timeline.
Yeah, you will be.
Okay. Is there any participating? Oh, look at that. 1, 2, Mort's like, okay.
It just didn't get that far down the
It
line.
didn't get that far down the line. 1, 2, 3, yeah. And then, another future agenda item, I can't think of any. Can't think of any. So I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion.
Mort makes the motion, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? So moved. Thank you, everyone.